So today we're in conversation with Casey Ellis. He is the founder of Bugcrowd. He's the CTO at Bugcrowd. He's also the founder of Disclose.io. And that's actually something I want to begin with today. So for those who don't know, Disclose.io is an open source project which is aimed at standardizing responsible disclosure. So could you please tell us what made you start Disclose.io?
Sure, Farah. Thanks for the chat as well. It's great to speak. So basically with Disclose.io, what we noticed starting Bugcrowd and even looking around at some of the vulnerability disclosure and bug bounty programs that predated the space with the platforms involved, lawyers don't really know how to do this. When you think about the process of going to a legal team and saying, hey, we're going to, those people that we've been trying to keep away all this time, we want to actually invite them in now. And they kind of freak out. The thing that happens with lawyers, and this is part of their job, it's not a diss, but if they're uncertain about things, they tend to get quite verbose. So you end up with really long, complicated briefs. And what we were seeing really in a Bugcrowd context was the fact that people don't really read those briefs necessarily anyway. So that's creating legal risk for the bug hunters, right? You got people that aren't lawyers, you got people that are English as a second language, all of those different things. And it's like, we need to simplify and standardize this. So that's where Disclose.io was born. And it's grown into a whole bunch of other stuff since as well.
That sounds really great. I think that's something like this is happening in India too. So if I talk about the startup scene in India right now, every 10 days or so, we see a unicorn come up. And these unicorns are mostly B2C brands and they're mostly fintech brands. So how does Bugcrowd plan to cash in on this? Because I feel like most of these startups are consumer facing brands, and any breach is going to affect their reputation and will probably lead to a bigger fine because they do store financial data.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, for startups, I think the biggest risk is existential in terms of not getting future funding or losing customers, because in that early phase, the value of the actual data that might be stolen, save fintech companies and healthcare companies, places like that, it hasn't grown in size to the point where it's necessarily that valuable yet. That tends to come a bit later. But for a startup, even out to Series C, there's always the risk of the company just falling over and not continuing to work into the future. So how Bugcrowd's cashing in on that, so to speak, is helping them launch vulnerability disclosure programs as a preeminent thing. I think for startups, like, it's an expected part of being on the internet at this point. So you might as well do it well. It's one of the reasons that we have Disclose.io on the language side, if you want to do it yourself, or we can actually help out through the platform and the team in a Bugcrowd context. But then beyond that, all the different things we do, like attack surface management, pen testing, bug bounty programs proper. It really depends on where the company's up to and what it needs to do next from a risk management standpoint.
Right. I think in India also, I think every Indian kid is also pressurized to go into engineering. And I think we have a lot of engineers in general in India. There's a lot of workforce in that sense. And if we see the Inside the Mind of a Hacker report, I think 25% of hunters on Bugcrowd at least are from India. So how do you think we can create awareness about bug bounty programs for these engineers and kind of get them to hop onto this platform, because they already have an engineering background and they're already into that? But there's also a huge employment issue here because a lot of these people graduate and they don't have jobs. So in that sense, how do you think awareness can be created for the hunters?
Yeah, for sure. It's a really good question. I think there's two aspects to it. One is just to have more for them to do, on Bugcrowd and just in general, frankly. This is a marketplace in some ways. Like you've got the hunters on one side and you've got the people that are actually running programs on the other side. And currently my belief is that the market's actually demand constrained. So there's more people able to do the work or wanting to do the work. Adoption's kind of catching up to that. And it's definitely, it's accelerated over the past 10 years I've been doing this, but there's still a long way to go. So, on that end of it, I think folks that are working for an organization as an engineer, actually bringing this up with them, saying, hey, like, this is a way for us to get better insight on our risk posture. Like, we should start, a vuln disclosure, a bug bounty, or a crowdsourced security program. On the hunter side, I really think it's about signing up and just getting amongst it. Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
If you're not in it, you can't take advantage of it. And it really is for all different levels of skill as well. I think the people that have more unique skills, or the people that are really focused on being excellent at their craft, tend to do better. But that doesn't mean that people that are just starting out can't get anything done. So it's really just starting is a lot of how I think about it. And then education, like going through some of your content, for example, depending on where people are at. Like there's Bugcrowd University, there's the Level Up Conference, there's other content creators like Hack Luke and Insider PhD, and they're all very supportive of helping people get to the next stage of value in their career. So tapping into that stuff, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of content available now, lots of resources to learn from. But if someone were to mentor, a current hunter had to mentor a newbie, what would be some tips you would give them?
Get them doing a whole bunch of different things. I think there's a traditional road to bug bounty hunting where you learn how to do attack surface identification, you figure out how to use nuclei, and you just kind of plaster the internet with packets and see what comes back. Everyone's doing that, which means if there's things to be found, they've probably been found by now, and they might have even been fixed. So if you're mentoring someone, like teaching them those skills is kind of a core skill to have. I do think that's important, but not stopping there. So it's sort of like, what else are you interested in? Are you interested in hardware? Are you intrigued by artificial intelligence? Are you someone who like looks at old computers and gets really excited, and maybe you should learn COBOL or Java, for example? There's all of these kind of, like, if you think opposite, I think there tends to be more opportunity if you approach a mentee in that sort of way. Because the other side of it is you're trying to connect them to the things that they love doing the best. Like I really do believe that once you've found that spark, once you found that connection, that's when the magic comes out, because you just want to learn more, you want to do more, and all of a sudden it's productive and everyone's happy, right? So helping your mentee find that thing, I think, is the most important thing.
Yeah, I think cybersecurity in general is a wide domain, and people probably don't realize that before they're entering. I think it's very important to explore, like you said, all the arenas, and then figure out what you're interested in before you go in and actually go deep in it.
100%. It goes right from the user down to the silicon. Right. You think about the length of that tech stack and how many different ways it can get implemented. And then you've got the offensive side, the defensive side, and the architectural design side of it as well. So there's all of these different dimensions that you could potentially engage with. Just making sure that rookies are aware of the scope of the space, and then probably helping them a little bit choose a thing as well, because it can get so broad that you get confused into a whole lot of everything. Like that's not necessarily a great thing either. So helping them kind of have along and find their thing. Yeah, I think that's where the mentorship would actually be valuable. So do you think this space right now, with the awareness that's being created, do you think the cybersec space is going to get crowded in the next 4 to 5 years? I think it already is. There's a VC analyst firm in SF called Momentum Partners, and they do this kind of vendor cybersecurity ecosystem thing. There's this slide that's like the butt of a lot of jokes. It has at least 1,500, maybe 2,000 logos on it. And the joke is, have we solved it yet? In the sense of, there's a lot of different point solutions and a lot of different things that people identify and try to actually build a company around. And a lot of them are really good ideas. But the challenge is you can't do all of it, right? So in that sense, I do think it's crowded, but it's crowded more because it's confused, not because the problem's solved. So when we talk about upskilling in your early stages, in the early stages of your career, how did you decide where you wanted to upgrade your skills? Can you tell us maybe like an example of 2-3 points where you decided you wanted to upskill and why you chose that particular thing to upskill for? Oh, wow. That's a fun one. I think actually, two that I'll throw out there. One is actually like finding and building out mentorship and learning how to be a better mentee. So, identifying people that have done things that I want to do and gone beyond that, but also been in the position that I am at that point in time, right? So they can sort of empathize where I'm at now, but also take me to, where I want to go. Learning how to receive that, learning how to ignore a decent chunk of what they say, because you're not handing them the steering wheel, you're just asking for advice. You've got to contextualize it into what you believe to be true, right? And I think a lot of people screw that part up. Like I've definitely done that in the past. So that'd be one. The other is constantly up leveling your mentors. So it's sort of, being able to say, okay, have I now grown to the point that I want to? And is it time for me to actually look for new folk to bring in and bring around for me to learn from? That's been a really interesting journey, especially during Bugcrowd, because, I've been in security pretty much since I finished high school and tried to do this the whole way along. But Bugcrowd was sort of a rocket ship in terms of understanding business and fundraising and all the crazy things that happen in Silicon Valley. So yeah, there have been points in time where I'm like, oh my God, okay, I've now progressed past what I'm able to get access to from my mentor network. I need to find some more people to be able to, ask the dumb questions and figure out what to do next, or help me figure out what to do next.
Right.
Yeah.
So when it comes to that, what do you keep in mind when you evaluate your colleagues, or even when you just seek out friends? Like what are some things you keep in mind?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, ethical alignment is pretty important to me. I don't have a problem with people that have different, views or ethical standpoints or even morals to myself. But if you're going to partner with someone, then it's pretty important to be at least roughly on the same page with different things that you believe, or, particularly when it comes to business. I mean, in security, it's pretty important. There's a lot you could learn from bad guys. Is that something that you want to do? Maybe not, right? Or do you want to bring them close, or do you want to just learn from afar? That's kind of an example of what I'm talking about. Aside from that, just tenacity and curiosity. Like I love people have, that kind of go-getter thing going on. They're excited. It could be anything, but they've got this sort of drive to get it done and this excitement. I kind of feed off that, and I feed into that quite well as a leader. So I always kind of enjoy working with folk like that. And curiosity in terms of like, we're all just kind of stumbling through life, discovering stuff. People that kind of approach life in that way, I try to be like that myself, but also I enjoy having those folk around. So those are some fundamentals. And then it's really a question of, in a mentorship context, like what have they done? Like what are the things that they've actually done? Is this someone who's done a thing that I eventually want to do? How does that all work? And then that'll sort of determine how I engage with.
Yeah, those are some great insights. All right. So my next question is, what problems do you think currently exist in InfoSec as an industry that can be solved by building products around them?
Oh, wow. All of them? Actually, no, not all of them. People being people and doing people things, I don't think we can solve that with the product. We can only mitigate it. Because, I often say that in context of bounty and VDP, especially with large organizations, it's like the point isn't to call your engineers stupid. They're just doing their job. But they're also human, and humans make mistakes. So you've just got to anticipate that and be prepared for it. That's a lot of what I see the true value of vulnerable disclosure and bug bounty actually being. It's finding issues, but it's also teaching the company that to err as human. And it's smarter and more resilient to plan ahead. Yeah, I think there's the AI piece I mentioned before, being able to identify when training data sets are tainted. That's a really compelling problem. There's people starting to work on that pretty intently now. But that's one I've been thinking about for a little while, just because of what I was saying before. It's everywhere. We've slapped machine learning on everything, and there's a very small set of people that actually know what it does and how it works. So to be able to detect taint is a good one. I do also think that 2020 kind of revealed to some extent that information warfare and cybersecurity are kind of conjoined twins, if that makes sense. Because I think information warfare people don't tend to think about the computers. Cybersecurity people don't tend to think about the information warfare side of it. But the elections here in the US in 2020, like pretty clearly demonstrated that no, they're quite closely tied together. So, finding ways to make the population more resilient to disinformation, misinformation, making sure that there's an ability to fact check and not be kind of guided or driven by advertiser revenue or ML or whatever else might be doing it.
Right.
Just to be able to make your own decisions and actually form your own conclusions. I think that's a problem that I'd love to see solved. It's fascinating. I love talking to people that are working on it because it's just really complicated. Like it's actually a really hard problem to solve, but it's quite an important one, I think.
Okay, I think this is the last question that I have for you. So when the pandemic started, you moved to Australia. For 2 years, you were there. How did you run Bugcrowd from there? Because you kind of pivoted your life for those 2 years. So
yes.
Can you tell us about that?
With great difficulty is probably the best way to frame that. There was a lot of early starts, all that kind of stuff, like still trying to operate roughly on the San Francisco time zone from Sydney. I don't recommend that because, we knew it wasn't a permanent thing that we were doing, but, it stretched out for 2 years. So that got a little bit tiring. But, aside from that, like the team in Australia grew a ton over that period. So I was actually able to work locally with, the likes of like Michael Skelton, Luke, Vortex, like all that crew, Rami. Like there's a bunch of really good people actually in the offensive security team for Bugcrowd in that part of the world, as well as an R&D team, Andy White and his crew who work on the product side of things. So I was less able to do the the real-time stuff here in the US, but more able to do stuff with the Australian team. That was awesome. I really enjoyed that. And I think as well, it's not just a US problem, right? It exists in Australia as well. One thing I did learn that was really interesting was that I think it's inherently more difficult to be west of where where things are happening, because any given day you wake up, they've already been awake for 6 hours. So you inherit whatever grenade has to pin out at that point. And if you're trying to get things done on a proactive basis, it's constantly being interrupted by things that happens to the east of you. And literally that's a function of how the earth rotates. So I'm not exactly sure how to solve that problem, but it was, I experienced that in a very different way while I was in Sydney this last trip. So I think the thing that was positive about that was feeding it back into Bugcrowd as a company and making sure that the rest of the American team and even the people in EMEA and Europe thinking about Americans were thinking about the similar sort of thing.
Right. That makes sense. And it doesn't sound easy, but I think it is.
I don't recommend it. It wasn't, I'll correct how you characterize it just a little. Like we literally bugged out. So we knew what was going to happen. We had, friends with, basically understood what was going to happen in terms of shutdowns and different things here in the US, and also what was going to happen in Australia. We went from deciding to fly back to Australia, making the decision, booking the tickets, jumping on the plane. That was less than a day that all happened in. So we literally just bugged out. But we're in the airport as the president declared emergency in the US, and we actually got into Australia 2 days before they shut the borders. The main reason was to not get cut off from extended family because they're all back down there.
Right.
So that part worked. Getting stuck there for 2 years wasn't ideal. But it was an adventure. Everyone had, I can't complain, honestly. You look at, how difficult other folk had COVID. That definitely wasn't convenient or very exciting, but I still feel pretty grateful to have had those choices.
Just wanted to thank you for coming on my channel and having a chat with me. It was really nice talking to you about India, about Disclose.io and Bugcrowd and everything else. I hope my audience takes away something from this because I think we spoke about a lot of valuable things.
Absolutely. Thank you it's always a pleasure catching up, Farah. And, shout out to everyone who's watching. You can just go to bugcrowd.com. There is a bugcrowd.com/try-bugcrowd. if you're a researcher, or if you're someone who's looking at starting a vuln disclosure or bug bounty company in India or wherever else you might be watching this from, and hope to see you on the platform.